Buddy, I have a doozy for you today in my never-ending quest to find awesome guests to come on here. I might have outdone myself this time. I've been wanting to get Vish on for a while. Vish is part of his own YouTube channel that you can find. I'm going to look it up right now because I forgot the name. It's Blake and Vish Sports. Yep. He has his own YouTube. He's also he also is frequent on Grant Cohn's channel too. And I've been hoping and praying I could get this to happen. And Vish has allowed me to have him on. And Vish, if you could explain to everybody where to find you and what you're doing, and then we can get into it.
Yeah, so first, Aaron, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the nice words you mentioned at the beginning, but it's truly an honor for me to come on with you. So I appreciate you having me on. Where you can find me, I'm at Vish Kumaran on Twitter. I put my username right there. I tweet about a lot of things in the NFL. I tweet about occasionally about other sports, but mostly about football and the 49ers. You can find me, as Aaron mentioned, on YouTube at Blake and Vish Sports, where my buddy Blake and I talk about all things NFL. It's not just 49ers. We talk about everything from all kinds of teams, and we talk about basketball. We just talk about everything sports that we like to talk about. And so you can find us there. And then finally, I do a show with Grant Cohn every Monday. It's called Mondays with Vish. And you can find that show on Grant's YouTube channel. And I think it's a pretty good show, so I think you should check it out, definitely.
Yeah, I'm absorbing so much 49er YouTube. I've had John Chapman on. I've had Eric Crocker. I've had Larry Krueger. I've been trying to shoot for the moon because I'm all about learning from other people. Even someone as young as you are, your knowledge of things far exceeds mine as far as even film study or, just breaking down a player. I'm more of just a fan and a person who sees what I call what I see, but to have someone who has even a more depth of way of seeing things. Same with Grant too. See, Grant, he might be controversial sometimes, but he gets people thinking and he gets the eyes on his channel. So he's doing what you're supposed to do. You know what I mean? Whether you always agree or not is one thing, but the man has just a way. And you guys, Jason, man, I sit there and watch you guys on those streams and I'm just like, whew, I'm going to try to follow that up, but I don't know if I can do it.
Oh, I really appreciate that. You're really too kind. And yeah, Grant is controversial per se, but I don't actually even look at it as controversy anymore. I think we've reached a point where he asks the questions that you need to ask. And the reason people call them controversial is because as a fan, those are the uncomfortable questions, right? Yes. Last summer, he was constantly asking about where is John Lynch and why has John Lynch not gotten his contract extension, right? As a fan, you would like to think it's La La Land with the 49ers. They're coming off the Super Bowl and all of that. But as a reporter, as somebody covering the team, it's his job. He's doing his job by asking those questions because it's his responsibility to figure out why there might be something like that going on. So, I don't like the controversial tag on him. And one thing I will say to those that not anything against, I think what you mentioned was correct. It's more for those who, still dislike Grant from maybe a couple years ago or something like that. The one thing I will say, if you check him out on YouTube, whatever you want to say about his football takes, I think they're great. Some people don't like them as much. This is one of the nicest people out there. And when you watch him, the two things that'll strike you is one, Grant's really authentic and Grant's genuinely a good person. And I think that it'll really change your opinion on whether he's controversial or whether you don't like his take. So I hate to just make this about Grant and all of that, but I did want to give him a big, quick shout out because you talked about it like that.
I think the thing with him is he's not a fan. He's coming at it from an analyst point of view. So when I've had to learn myself to not get so knotted up over things when he makes videos on it and be like, he's not a fan, Aaron. He's coming at it from a strictly analyst point of view. He's not coming at it from a homer point of view. Problem with a lot of us, especially me, because I'm been a Niners fan since 1989. I take things like super offensive. Although sometimes there's some in the media, like I like that Grant goes out of his way to like kind of push the envelope, whereas some in the media tend to kind of go with the softball questions, and I respect that. Um, Speaking of that, it's gonna kind of go right into my first topic. I want to get your opinion on this Mike Florio talk about there being trouble in Niner land or this or that or the other. I made a little quick video on my channel the other day, and a lot of people reacted to it, and not a lot of people reacted very favorably to what's his name? I just forgot his name.
Florio.
To Florio. And I just wanted to get your opinion on it. Where's he coming from? And do you agree? Do you disagree? How do you feel about that whole situation?
So, whether I agree or disagree, obviously I'm a 49ers fan first, like you. So I hard disagree with him, but I do think that his logical perspective does need to be taken into account. Now, Florio is a guy that I think you can really put the controversial tag on because he is a very inquisitive guy. So if you've watched Florio over the years, he's always trying to ask the questions that nobody wants to ask or nobody wants to know, right? It's one of those things that, could be true, but nobody wants to know if it's true and all of that. And he's always asking questions like that. And so my first reaction to the Florio thing was, who really cares? But I do think there is some validity to the things that he said. And I think even as a 49ers fan, there are some very bizarre things with what the 49ers did this offseason. Trading up for a quarterback a month before the draft and then not letting anybody have an idea and basically portraying it as if you didn't have the idea of which quarterback you wanted is a very bizarre thing to do, especially when you're trading up in a draft that two quarterbacks are going already, 1 and 2, right? And this is how I always ask these questions to myself, right? Because as a 49ers fan, even though I didn't love Trey Lance as much as a couple other guys before the draft, once they drafted Trey Lance, I'm biggest Trey Lance fan. I'm so ecstatic they drafted Trey Lance, I love Kyle Shanahan. I'm so happy he finally got to draft a quarterback, all of those things. But I asked the question of, the Chicago Bears are my local team here. I live in a suburb just outside of Chicago. I always ask the question to myself, how would I react if the Bears did something like this? And Aaron, I'm not going to lie to you. If the Bears with Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace had traded up 1 month before the draft to get the third best quarterback in the draft, or the guy perceived to be the third best quarterback in the draft, and not knowing who it was, go through this entire thing of we wanted to go up so we can do our due diligence on a couple of guys because we liked them enough so we felt comfortable taking them at 3, I'd have made fun of them. I'd have been like, this is the stupidest move in NFL history. Like, you don't trade up for a position, right? Nobody in NFL history has ever traded up for the right to draft one of 3 guys, right? When the Rams traded up to pick 1, it was for Jared Goff, right? When the Chiefs traded up to pick 10, it was for Patrick Mahomes. Right. When the Houston Texans traded up to 12, it was for Deshaun Watson. It wasn't, let's trade up to 12 a month before the draft and study 3 guys. Hopefully we land at one of these guys. Now, I think Trey Lance has been the leader throughout the entire process. I agree with that line of thinking, right? And I think that they've kind of portrayed it like that. Now, we can't be sure of it, and the reason I say we can't be sure is because the Niners, really, they do themselves no favors if they say that we liked Mac Jones and then we changed our mind, right? It has to be Trey Lance from day one because, like I mentioned earlier, you don't trade up for a position. You trade up for a player, right? So, and I don't think they're lying to us from that standpoint. I'm just saying that we'll never know if they're lying or telling us the truth, even though I believe they're telling the truth. But what I will say is when Florio asks these questions and says, like, these are all obviously the worst case scenario, but I do think it's a scenario that we all need to internalize, right? Because he's laying out, we're all thinking of the best case scenario, right? Jimmy starts for a bit. Jimmy does great. Trey Lance comes in. Niners take over the league. Kyle Shanahan, Trey Lance win 3 Super Bowls in the next 10 years. That's what we all think is happening, right? That's what I want to happen. That's what I'm here for. But he's laying out the scenario of you traded up 1 month before the draft. You weren't exactly sure who you were going to take. You knew 2 quarterbacks were going earlier. You still haven't figured out this entire Garoppolo thing, right? We don't know what they're going to do with Jimmy. We're not even sure if they can do anything with Jimmy at this point. I think it was a bizarre thing to do. What the Niners did was bizarre. Now, just because it was bizarre doesn't mean it was right or wrong. And I think Florio, sometimes the way he writes certain things, you can see the salt. You can see that he's cryptic. But I do think there's validity to the points that he makes. I just feel like his delivery was just a little salty. And in regards to the Mac Jones angle, here's where I kind of am at the Mac Jones angle. I know a lot of people will disagree with me, but I can't. I'm sorry. I can't believe that there's this world where Mike Silver, Adam Schefter, Matt Mayoko, I mean, three of the most connected guys when it comes to the 49ers. I mean, Adam Schefter has known Kyle Shanahan since he was a 15-year-old. Mike Silver has known Mike Shanahan, and he's the one who broke Kyle Shanahan coming to the 49ers. Matt Mayoko has been the 49ers' number one guy when it comes to breaking all sorts of local news, right? Like if the national guys get the kick first, Matt Mayoko is usually the guy that has the biggest insight with the 49ers. He's the senior most reporter at this point. I can't imagine them just making up information out of thin air and saying that this Mac Jones stuff is not real, because that's what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch said, right? We saw all these reporters make up this information. Well, I'm sorry. Like, I love Kyle Shanahan. I love John Lynch. Like, Kyle Shanahan's my favorite person in the NFL. I'm to a point where I like Kyle Shanahan so much, I've considered, like, well, if he leaves, will I become as much a fan of the team that he goes to as much as I am the 49ers? Like, that's how much I love Kyle Shanahan. At the same time, I think that's they're lying. Because I'm sorry, Schefter, why does Schefter need to make up information? Why does Mike Silver need to make up information? These guys don't miss with stuff like this.
Do you think the Niners intentionally might have sandbagged things so that people thought they knew, just to throw people off their scent? Or do you think that the Niners maybe had an idea that, you know, it could have been Mac, and then when they did their due diligence, they kind of changed their mind? Regardless of what happened, I'm happy that it. How do I put this without making Mac Jones out to be like, I hope he has a great career. I see where the league's going, and I see the type of quarterbacks that are successful. And I wanted the Niners to kind of step into the modern age and you know, try something different, something that the rest of the league is doing. Right. And the fact that they actually had the intestinal fortitude to make that decision, to change that whole quarterback room. That was my biggest gripe at the end of last season. Right. Is that whole quarterback room has to change. If it stays the same, we're going to suck next year. That was exactly what I thought. And so for once, I'm usually very pessimistic, or I have maybe not a negative. Sometimes I expect very little out of the Niners, especially with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, because I'm just so sick of us not winning Super Bowl. So I'm like, everything that happens, I'm always like, yeah, whatever. That's the fact that they actually went and made those moves and turned over that quarterback room. I will give them that. And at this point, it really doesn't matter who, what, where, when, and why. The fact is, Trey Lance is the quarterback, and I'm very happy about that.
Right, and I think your bottom line is the correct point, right? Like, that's why the Florio thing is so irritating. Like, Florio, we're 2 months removed from it. Nobody cares anymore. Trey Lance is the guy. Let's move on to figuring out how good Trey Lance is going to be and how he's going to be really good and how Kyle Shanahan can best utilize him, right? That's the point. But in regards to, like, the Mac Jones thing, and you asked me, I think, if I believe. Well, here's what I kind of believe now after the draft. And this is where I kind of part ways with the media, right? The media was so confident that Justin Fields wasn't part of this discussion. Everything we've gotten from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch after the draft has told us that this was a Mac Jones, Trey Lance move. This was not about Justin Fields. Rich Eisen's podcast, Kyle Shanahan, the day after the draft, went on and immediately said, we've studied Mac Jones, we studied Trey Lance, and we felt comfortable if we could get one of those guys. Now, they might have felt better about Trey than Mac Jones, and it's clear that that's how they felt, but it's clear that they also liked Mac Jones in this process, right? Justin Fields' name has not been mentioned. So that's where, like, the media got that right? Like, Mike Lombardi, everybody killed him when he said it was 98% Mac Jones, 2% Trey Lance, right?
I was one of those people that killed him. I apologize for that.
But was he wrong? He said there's no way in hell it would be Justin Fields. He was right. How did he know?
It's a good question.
From the beginning, right? Chris Sims, Peter King interviewed him the day after the trade. He said, I think the trade ups for Mac Jones makes the most sense. I wouldn't be shocked if it was Trey Lance. I wouldn't be shocked. Didn't mention
Eisen
Justin
even
Fields.
said it right before the pick, a couple days
Right.
before. Rich Eisen even made that he thinks it's Trey Lance. He said there was some whisperings in the inner circles of wherever.
Yeah, because Chris Sims said before the draft that the rumor around the league is that Adam Peters is infatuated with Trey Lance, just smitten with Trey Lance. That was the rumor around the league, and he put a name on it. He said Adam Peters specifically. Now, he didn't make the decision. This was a John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan decision, but you could see where that was circulating. But the bottom line was all these guys from the beginning said this is Mac Jones or Trey Lance, and they picked Mac Jones as the guy they thought they felt more stronger that it would be Mac Jones over Trey Lance. But they were right that it wasn't Justin Fields, right? I personally like Justin Fields the best out of all those three quarterbacks when I watched the film of them. Now, I'm not an expert when it comes to that. I'm just trying to learn and every day get better at what I'm watching. But the opinion I formed was that of those three, Fields, in my opinion, was the best choice. Well, clearly I was wrong. Fields wasn't even a part of this discussion. So that's where, I feel like we pick and choose where we rip the media based on our own convenience. And that's where, you know how you talked about the objectivity when it comes to evaluating our team compared to the rest of the league? I think there also should be an objectivity in this situation that there's probably truth to the story of what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have told us after the draft, but there was probably also truth to that Mac Jones smoke that was coming out before the draft. Now, we're all good and happy. I think this is the last time we need to have this discussion. We're all happy it's Trey Lance, and we're excited to see what he does. I think that's the real bottom line here. But I think we'll never get the actual truth, but the truth is probably somewhere in between these two extremes of it's Mac Jones or Trey Lance, but most likely Mac Jones. Everybody in the league thinks it's Mac Jones, and it was never Mac Jones. It was always Trey Lance. We knew the whole time, blah, 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 you know?
Right. And I think the telling thing, what you said, it was never Justin Fields, is Lynch saying that they were looking at video of Trey Lance on the plane ride after seeing Justin Fields. So they had already, Kyle had already moved on mentally, I think. Speaking of Trey Lance, there's been a lot of talk today about, the little tidbits of video that they like to release of just how obsessed with getting better this guy seems to be. I'm really impressed. What do you think about it? Do you think it's just one of those things where maybe it's somebody in his camp putting those videos out, or do you think he's legitimately trying to harden his craft and get himself, to try to get that starting job? Because I think the coach said it. He said it's a possibility if they go to camp, and it's not like a foregone conclusion that Jimmy's going to win that job.
Yeah. So I think it's both of those things. I think he could be that person, that works his butt off. And by all accounts before the draft, every person that met with him was just blown away by Trey Lance's maturity. I'm barely older than Trey Lance. When Trey Lance stands in front of the mic, his presence, the way he speaks, his eloquence, all of that, it is very impressive. Trey Lance is like Robert Saleh, John Lynch level impressive in front of a mic. There's no doubt about that. I've said that he's the most impressive quarterback I've seen in press conferences since Dak Prescott.
Very relaxing. I get really relaxed around him. I'd be totally ready to go to war because he doesn't seem like
he's so confident. He's so confident, but there's no arrogance. There's an authenticity. There's an honesty. Yeah. He has a very deep, very deep but soft voice. He's just a great speaker. But and by all accounts, I believe that he is someone, that works his butt off to get better and all of that. But I do think at the end of the day, it's really just the media putting stuff out. Now, am I going to sit here and tell you that every NFL player does this? No, because the reality of the situation is that not every NFL player does this. But I think that most NFL players that are striving to be the best, guys that we don't get to see a lot of video of, are probably doing this. I'll give an example, right? A guy that I feel the 49ers personally don't give enough publicity to, even though he's one of their best players, Jimmy Ward. We have not gotten one video from Jimmy Ward in 7 years of his offseason workouts. But let me tell you something. I don't think there's ever been a camp where anybody comes and says Jimmy Ward is not in great shape. He doesn't look great. All of those things, right? So I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. just because I think that just because the video is out there, it doesn't mean that he's outworking anybody per se. But
Right.
just because his media team is doing a great job of putting this stuff out doesn't mean it's just a media play. It could be that he's genuinely getting better, but there's also a little bit of the media play going in there too. And if you're the 49ers, you really have to do everything to sell this, because again, you traded up through 2 picks to go get this guy. You said that we needed this guy. We didn't need Justin Fields. We didn't need Mac Jones. I mean, Chicago's doing the same thing right now for Justin Fields. New England's not really doing the same thing for Mac Jones. But I mean, I'm sure the Jets are doing the same thing for Zach Wilson. The point is, this is a business. You want to sell your rookie quarterback. Trey Lance is the future cash cow of the San Francisco 49ers. Jed York, the money he's making in the next 5 years is directly tied to Trey Lance, because if Trey Lance becomes a star, the 49ers stock will just go through the roof, right? Because Trey Lance is young, he's classy, he's very well spoken, he's got a very flashy game, right? You talked about the Mac Jones. Mac Jones doesn't have that energetic pop that Trey Lance has in terms of like just being like Trey Lance's running ability and massive.
He doesn't
arm strength,
excite a fan base like Trey Lance does.
Trey Lance does, and that's where I think if like he could excite. Do you remember how exciting Kaepernick was in 2012? I think that's how exciting Trey Lance could be times 2, because he's got Kyle Shanahan with him. So this offense would be like a top 3 or 4 offense, or top 1 offense if Trey Lance is fantastic. So long story short, I know I went on and on, rambled a little bit there. I apologize for that. But long story short, I think both parts of your question are exactly correct. I think that this is a little bit of a media play and looking to sell him and looking to do all of those things. I don't think the conclusion here is that like, oh, he's just the hardest working guy ever and all of that based on a couple of videos. But at the same time, I don't think it's for the media play either, right? I think he is genuinely this hardworking, impressive, mature guy. It's just that, these 2 videos aren't the reason to draw that conclusion.
Yeah, we got a long way to go. We have training camp still to happen. Well, I've asked a lot of my viewers recently, or a lot of my guests recently, and I know a lot of people in the chat are going to probably nail me for this, but I ask everybody to give a grade, an A to F or a 1 to 10 grade of the Niners offseason, mixing draft, free agency, re-signing their own guys, whatever. If you had to give a sliding grade from A to F or 1 to 10, what does your rating go?
Yeah, for me, it's an A-. It's an A-, and it's not even because I'm totally positive on the 49ers full draft and everything like that. I was very disappointed that the first time they addressed the cornerback position was after the first 100 picks. I haven't watched as much Ambry Thomas to give you a strong opinion on him. Maybe he's way better than a corner drafted outside of there, but I felt like it was a need in terms of depth that they needed to answer. But overall, I thought the 49ers offseason was a massive success when they hit free agency and they brought back Trent Williams, DJ Jones, Jaquiski Tartt, K'Wan Williams. I felt like those 4 players and Kyle Juszczyk. I felt like those 5 players, I thought there was no way in hell the 49ers bring those 5 players back. I thought there was no way in hell. And before that, there was the D Ford contract restructure. And I didn't feel like if Tartt didn't come back, I didn't look at Harris or Moore as starting safeties. So I felt like that was an increased need. At the nickel corner position, Jamar Taylor played very well for the 49ers actually last year, but he's still coming off a torn ACL. And, their original backup nickel was DJ Reed, who's now in the Seahawks. So they didn't have him. Trent Williams, to me, is a Hall of Fame left tackle. This is Walter Jones. This is Orlando Pace. This is Tyron Smith. This is one of those guys that's just you put him in at left tackle, and he's great for you for 16 games a year. So to me, bringing him back was just essential, and they managed to do it while bringing back Tartt, Williams. And then, I sometimes don't always value Juszczyk's contributions as much as they're portrayed to be. I feel like he's the guy that they signed originally as the big free agent, and he's a well-spoken guy from Harvard. And so the 49ers sell him as maybe a little bigger player than he is. And he does make a little bit all those Pro Bowls because he's a fullback. Not saying he isn't a great player, because he's an outstanding player and he is a major part of this offense, because he is what kind of marries the run and the pass. Because of his versatility, you can do so many different things to make the run and the pass look the exact same. I just think at some point a guy playing, barely over 50% of your snaps and doing only so much for you, there is a little overvaluation of what he does. But I still think bringing him back was particularly great because he is an excellent player. Maybe not as excellent as the Niners sell him to be. Like, the Niners sell him as if he's one of the 3 or 4 best players on this roster. I'm not personally sure about that. But I do think that he's an excellent player, and bringing him back was huge. So for me, right there was an A+, right? You have a great roster now for 2021, and you managed to do this while keeping Jimmy Garoppolo, right? One of my biggest questions was, you can't maintain this roster with Jimmy Garoppolo at this price. Well, I was wrong.
Nope.
They restructured Dee Ford, and they managed to do that. Then we got to the draft, and again, I still think it's a bizarre move. That's the word I'll use, bizarre. A month before the draft, trading up to 3 and not having the greatest, like having an idea, but not having the utmost conviction on who that guy is. Bizarre. But at the end of the day, they went and got their guy at quarterback. So they solved the quarterback issue, and they finally, as you said, rebuilt this quarterback room. I'm 100% with you. Them not touching this quarterback room after over 2018 and 2019 and 2020 it's terrible, because they should have realized in 2017 and 2018 CJ Beathard is not a quarterback that should just be handed an NFL roster.
No.
Nick Mullins, while he played well in 2018, the talent of Nick Mullins is not a guy that should be starting an extended period of time in the NFL. And the reality of the situation is, we can blame Garoppolo's injuries, but there's a reason a guy like Case Keenum has had a 10-year NFL career, right? There's a reason that Chase Daniel goes from team to team every single year. There's a reason Denver just gave up a couple picks for Teddy Bridgewater, because you need to be ready for the scenario that your starting quarterback goes down. Now, you don't expect him to miss as much time as Garoppolo did, but you certainly need somebody that's capable of starting an extended period of time in terms of physical talent and mental capacity. Nick Mullins only checks one of those boxes. CJ Beathard, to me, he technically, from a talent perspective, might check both boxes, but I thought after the hits he took in 2017, his career was basically done. He was getting in like 3 car crashes a game. There was nothing they could do. They put him in too early. He wasn't ready. He was getting hit. And the fact that they didn't bring competition, it was terrible. That was one of the worst things this regime has done. The fact that they consistently rode with a quarterback room of Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Mullins, and CJ Beathard, and gave CJ Beathard a roster spot every single year. That was just wrong, in my opinion. And I've read a Bill Walsh book where he subscribes to this theory that you should draft a quarterback in every draft, whether it's between rounds 4 through 6, because you never know when you're going to draft Tom Brady, right? You never know. So you just draft a guy and you bring him in and you bring competition and develop him in your system. And I think there have been 3rd, 4th round, 5th round pick quarterbacks that have come out in the last few years that do have more talent than both Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard. Not saying they're better quarterbacks. I'm just saying from a talent perspective, you might have been able to develop them into something more than what those two guys were. Apologies for going on a small tangent. But now that they addressed that situation, right, they brought in Trey Lance. That's awesome. So that's kind of taken care of. The draft, I thought Aaron Banks was the best pick in the draft. He's a perfect system fit. He's a great pass blocker, something that's not exactly always what the Niners get when they draft these offensive linemen. Mike McGlinchey is the prime example, right? The dichotomy of Mike McGlinchey is that he's this all-world run blocker, and he's just average at pass protection. And it's a really hard pill to swallow when you draft a right tackle 9th overall, right? When you're drafting a right tackle in the top 10, you're hoping he's Jack Conklin, who's a little better pass protector than Mike McGlinchey. You're hoping he's Lane Johnson. You're looking for a guy that's a 10-year high-level starter. And Mike McGlinchey falls just under the high-level starter category solely because his pass blocking is average. It's not above average, it's average. So you can't be a true drop-back pass team, with Mike McGlinchey as your right tackle, because pass block, even at Notre Dame, it was something that he was average at, but he's this otherworldly run blocker, right? Laken Tomlinson, kind of the same issue. That's why he failed in Detroit. Well, Aaron Banks checks both of those boxes. Alex Mack, I didn't mention him in the signings because I would just mention the re-signings. I thought that was huge. I thought the
Me
center
too.
position, the kind of turmoil they had, I thought that was a big problem. So I think that was great. Again, for me, the reason it's an A minus is because I still think they haven't answered questions about depth at corner and depth at safety. I still think if Jason Verrett goes down next year, I like Emmanuel Moseley. I think he's a solid starter. I'm not sure Ambry Thomas, Diamador Lenore. These are 3rd and 5th round pick corners. Like, come on, how many
Right.
3rd and 5th round pick corners have become legitimate starters in the NFL? And
How
neither of them
many?
have the talent that Akello Witherspoon had. Akello Witherspoon has legitimate top 10 in the NFL type corner talent. Neither of these two guys, in my opinion, have that level of talent because there's just a physical requirement to play the corner position. There's a reason the top corners, Jair Alexander was the 18th pick in the draft. Marlon Humphrey was 15th. Jalen Ramsey was 5th. Because those high-level athletes go in the top 25, 30 picks of every draft because there's very few of them, right? So I that's probably the only reason I would still rank the offseason an A minus. I can't say I agree with every move like I've laid out, but I think they answered the questions as best as what they felt they could answer the questions. And that's why it's still an A, even though it's an A minus, right? Because I've mentioned it, Trey Lance wasn't my favorite quarterback at 3. But
Right.
who am I to say that this is the quarterback you should have drafted? It's more about addressing the quarterback position, finally being aggressive enough and doing something about it. And they did that with who they like, right? It doesn't matter who they draft at that point because that's about them, who they like. It's more about do they value the resources and go and address it. And they managed to do that. So overall, to me, it was a good offseason for the 49ers.
I think the one thing too is Kyle can be kind of stubborn and in disattaching himself. I don't know if that's a word, but from players that he drafts. And it took him a while with CJ Beathard. It took him a while with Dante Pettis, but I give him credit for finally, owning up to the fact that, he missed on a couple of them. Larry Krueger made a good point about Aaron Banks. He says if Aaron Banks is playing in the Super Bowl against Chris Jones of the Kansas City Chiefs, the 49ers win that Super Bowl. He said Chris Jones owned the 49ers in that Super Bowl.
Okay. So I think it's a fair point. I don't think that's why they lost the Super Bowl. I've seen a lot of that. Look, Chris Jones is one of the 3 or 4 best defensive tackles in the NFL. I used to get a lot of flack. I wasn't really on social media or known as a Niners content creator or anything, but in 18 and 19, I used to say that he's a better football player than DeForest Buckner. And every Niners fan that I know used to hate that I said that, but I just felt he was a more dominating physical presence than DeForest Buckner. I felt maybe DeForest Buckner is better technically, but I just felt like when it comes down to it, Chris Jones is a mammoth human being with 35-inch arms, and he just throws offensive linemen. And right. I do think there is a point of I think one of the biggest things with the 49ers is that we saw I really wish I was on a platform back then itself, because one of the things I did mention before the Super Bowl to a couple buddies, now nobody can verify this, so I just look like a guy talking out of my butt, but I said that, so I'll give the reason why I said that. I said that the 2 biggest reasons I feel that the 49ers, if they lose this Super Bowl, will be because Chris Jones dominates this offensive line and Jimmy Garoppolo plays a poor game. I think Jimmy Garoppolo playing a poor game, everybody had it. The reason I said Chris Jones is because we saw why they lost to Atlanta. A big guy named Grady Jarrett dominated that football game. We saw why Week 16 against the Rams was so difficult. That bad man, Aaron Donald, absolutely whipped the 49ers offensive line. The Niners offensive line, the Niners offense, they couldn't move the ball for basically a quarter and a half in that football game. And then they got the ball at their own 8-yard line. If you remember, Aaron Donald sits for 2 plays. First play is play action. You get George Kittle on a little over route over the middle of the field for about 35 yards. Next play, Tevin Coleman, 8-yard run. Your offense is jump-started now. If Aaron Donald's in, when he was in for the last 35 plays in that game, the Niners couldn't move the football in that football game. So that's why I said the Chris Jones. And, it turned out to be true to an extent, but I don't think protection is what hurt them, right? Because at the end of the day, we can look at 3rd and 5. The concept is called arches. Kyle Shanahan, favorite concept. George Kittle is the first read. He's running the arch route. The play is made for George Kittle. The Chiefs are playing man coverage across the board. George Kittle comes wide open in front of Garoppolo's face. you're paid $25 million. That's the play that a quarterback needs to be paid. Is the pocket perfect? No. Is there more than enough room to make the throw? Yes. Chris Jones didn't affect that play. And there were more plays if you go back and look at the Super Bowl. I think that the Tampa Bay Super Bowl and the Niners Super Bowl is closer than people would like to admit. The biggest difference was that Tampa Bay closed that game early. The Niners weren't scoring in the red zone. They were making mental errors to keep the Chiefs lasting around. That 20-10 ball game should have been a 30-10 ball game.
Yes.
Jimmy Garoppolo's ball placement throughout that football game was terrible. You go back and look at the open receivers, the game is schemed up. The game was really well schemed by Kyle Shanahan. And there's so many plays, and this is where completion percentage becomes kind of a bad stat, because you can say he was 19 for 22, but I remember the first play of the second half, Emmanuel Sanders, play action. He's wide open over the middle of the field. Garoppolo throws it behind him. Sanders makes the catch, goes to the ground making the catch, but he could have gotten 40 yards on that play. He got 15. His ball placement that entire football game was just a little bit low, a little bit high. There's one play he hit Bourne. It was on 3rd and 10. The next play on a little in route to convert the first down. But the play before, the Chiefs are in cover 0. I disagree with what some people say on this play. George Kittle, they busted the coverage. Daniel Sorensen's got George Kittle in man because it's cover 0. They busted the coverage, but Kittle is wide open in front of his face. He'll probably score a touchdown if he hits him, but he wasn't the only one. He ends up throwing the ball to Sanders, who is running who's running basically, I think it's an in route. I'm not even 100% sure. He's running a route that turns in towards the middle of the field. Cornerback's playing outside leverage, no safety in the middle of the field. This is cover 0. And it's a walk-in touchdown play for Emmanuel Sanders. Now, Emmanuel Sanders did get interfered with, and the call wasn't made, but the ball was also thrown at a spot that allowed the DB to interfere with him. Sanders had enough separation where if it's a better pass, put right on the money, it doesn't matter if the DB interferes him. He's playing outside leverage. He has no shot. Sanders is gone for a touchdown. Now, the Niners ended up scoring a touchdown on that possession, so it's not a play that you can say totally affected the outcome of the game. But these are the little details when you go back and watch. You're like, man, the quarterback just didn't make enough plays in that particular game. So it's disappointing, and I'm a big Jimmy Garoppolo fan. I think he's a great guy, and I've enjoyed every moment he's been the starting quarterback for the 49ers. But I also try and be as realistic and objective as possible when it comes to evaluating him. And I do my best to learn as many of the concepts and learn what's going on offense, what's going on defense, make sure that I'm actually watching both the coach's film and the game and just ensuring that I have the most objective view. And so I think Larry Krueger, I respect him a ton. He's fantastic at what he does. I think he makes a fair point, but I can't look at that game and say that, it was just Chris Jones, because the plays were still there for the quarterback to make them, and he didn't make them on that particular day.
Agreed. I totally agree. Yeah, Jimmy, it's funny that the 2 playoff games, they ran all over everybody, and Jimmy wasn't needed. And when Jimmy was needed, he didn't play particularly well.
Right.
And, you get into the Super Bowl, the stakes are at their highest, and Jimmy's play wasn't that great. Me and my nephew had this. We watched the Seattle game during the season, the one that
Greenlaw.
Greenlaw had the pick that returned to like midfield or like something. But Jimmy played so bad in that game, and he, they were missing a lot of guys.
That's looked at as one of his best games, but that's one of the games that I go back and watch, and I'm like, go watch the first half of that football game. It shouldn't have been 13-0 in the first half. It should have been 28-0. There were so many throws that Jimmy Garoppolo put receivers on the ground instead of them running for 35 yards. I mean, there was one drive where they went play action 3 times in a row. Emmanuel Sanders, George Kittle completion, and then one he missed. He was 2 out of 3 on those passes. Those receivers were wide open, and the ball was low. It was high. It was just off target to the point where, even quarterbacks like Kirk Cousins and Ryan Tannehill, guys who I think are actually very good quarterbacks that get underrated, really the biggest difference between them and Jimmy, you can talk about the decision-making aspect and the mental processing aspect, but the biggest difference is that when it comes to being a very accurate quarterback, it's when the guy's wide open, hit him in the chest and let him run with it, And Jimmy isn't always the best with his ball placement. He's accurate. You can't say he isn't accurate. The location of the football is usually pretty good, but the exact placement of the football, not always perfect.
Right. Me and I wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit. Me and Aponte were talking, and the Niners have their State of the Franchise coming on the end of the month, and me and him were both alive. I was about 15 when the Niners won their last Super Bowl. The talk is that they might bring back the Reds with the black outline. I just want to know, how are you as enthusiastic about that as guys that are a little bit older than you, as far as those jerseys? Are you
Yes.
a jersey guy? Because I definitely want to get one of those jerseys.
Yes.
I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yes, I am enthusiastic about it because actually, when I was little, my dad used to. I've watched the '94 Super Bowl 3 times. Actually, my dad has the game on tape and like VCR, and he used to put it in the 6-7-year-old me, and I used to watch that game. I used to love it, and those jerseys to me are absolutely awesome. I think it also helps that Deion Sanders wore those jerseys, and he might have the greatest swag and the greatest uniform drip in NFL history. But
best drip ever.
Absolutely,
him and Jerry.
100%. Yeah, Jerry had great uniform swag. It's underrated. But yeah, I think 100%. And then especially when I see the photoshops of Fred Warner. Now, Fred Warner looks great in every uniform, but when you see him in the '94 Reds, oh my God, like you're like, whoo, they'd look good.
I might have to get a Kittle, and hopefully if Warner gets a contract, I'm all about players. The only guys that I ever get jerseys of are guys that are locked in. Like, I don't get quarterbacks. Like, if Trey wins us a Super Bowl, he's getting a jersey. Or if he does really well this year. I wanted to switch gears again to something that was kind of a topic a couple days ago. It's kind of went down a little bit just because of the time, between mini camps and now training camp. What do you make of a lot of the injuries that have happened this offseason already?
In regards to the injuries, they're disappointing, right? Because it feels like this is the same offseason and we're going through the same exact thing every single offseason. And I understand when people say that, like these injuries, like, Justin School, we weren't even sure if he was going to make the roster. Tarvarius Moore, excellent special teamer, solid backup, but, he's not lived up to the billing of a third-round pick and all of that. But at the same time, I think I personally, as a fan, because I am a fan first, I've reached a point of frustration, and I was a little frustrated with Kyle Shanahan's answers at that press conference. I'm a huge Kyle Shanahan fan, but I was frustrated with the fact that every answer, every question, it felt like we already do that. It's like, you can't, like, this is just unlucky. We're just unlucky. And, that might be true, but I'm talking now just as an emotional fan. I wanted to just hear him say, you know what, we need to do something different. There's something that we're not doing right here, and we need to, and I promise we're going to figure out a way to right this, because this is the only thing that can hold this team back, and we cannot lose another year of going this route where we're seeing important players getting injured. And there's still a lot of football yet to be played. I personally can't give you the solution to this problem. I'm sorry. A lot of people ask me this question. What would you do to solve the 49ers injury issue? Well, how the hell do I know? If I knew how to solve that issue, I wouldn't be a college kid sitting in my bedroom talking to Aaron right now. I would be solving this issue for somebody.
In my bedroom too, so that there's no disappointment, or there's no shame on that.
Right, but if I had the answer, I would be solving this issue. But all I can tell you is, like, I'm not even 100% sure the 49ers know, right? Because it sounds like they're trying a lot of different things, and it just, till now, it just doesn't seem to be working perfectly. But what I will say is that I think the most important thing with these injury issues is that I just wish, and, this is just a fan perspective, because this doesn't change anything. But, man, I would have loved to listen to him just come out here and say, yeah, it's frustrating. It's disappointing. But you know what? I hope those guys get better. And as an organization, we're doing everything we can to ensure this doesn't happen again. That's all I wanted to hear him say. And instead, he was just defensive, like, I mean, yeah, it happens. They're playing football. What do you expect me to do? The problem is that there's 31 other teams playing football, and it's not happening to them. He blamed last season on the shortened off season. Well, there were 31 other teams with shortened off seasons that had solutions that didn't have 18 starters on IR or whatever the number was. I just threw out a
Exactly.
vague estimate of how many there was. And so
Yeah, it was pretty close.
you can say that, well, this. The bottom line is at some point we have to internalize this issue because it's no longer just the 49ers are unlucky. This is a trend.
Definitely. To wrap it up, I'm just going to ask you one more question because I know you're a busy guy. What is your excitement level knowing that COVID is somewhat lifting the restrictions and we're going to have fans back in the stadiums at some point? I don't know. Every state, like my state, I live in New York. I'm Western New York. Restrictions are pretty much lifted as far as if you're vaccinated. So, I mean, how are you excited to get Levi's up and running with some fans this year? Because I think without fans, it's just not the same.
So I personally, so first, before the NFL season, I'm like, wow, it's not going to be the same without fans. Then I watched as much football as I've ever watched. Didn't notice a damn difference, whether there were fans, whether there wasn't. Then we get to the NBA playoffs, and you're hearing Utah just going crazy because they're back to full capacity, and you're hearing the impact that audience makes on a game. You can feel it. You can feel the pressure. And I solely believe the reason the Clippers lost game 1 and game 2 is because Utah's fans got Utah over the top. I really do. I felt like the Clippers could never get control of that game because they could never quiet that building down. And when I hear that, I'm ecstatic. I can't wait because I think it's going to change the entire ordeal. And, I'm interested to see because there was a lot of guys that had really good seasons without the fans. And now I wouldn't say the fans make that much of an impact, but I do think that it helps in small ways to small things. And I'm interested to see, guys who had breakout seasons last year, if it was a mere fact of they weren't as rattled and as intimidated by the fans, and they were able to play free and play their best football. And I'm interested to see if they can do the same thing and replicate their success with the fans there. And I love what the NFL is doing. The NBA is seen as the more woke league than the NFL, and the NFL is seen as somewhat anti-player, and they are. I think their actual collective bargaining agreement with the players is bogus. I think the 17 games and only one team getting a bye is absolute BS because the one team that gets the bye has such an inherent advantage because if you have a week 7 bye and you don't get the bye, and you're not the 1 seed, I promise you can't go to the Super Bowl that year.
No.
It's just too much football played in a row. You're not going to the Super Bowl. Right? But the one thing I do like the NFL does is, have you seen their guidelines for vaccinated players and non-vaccinated players? They're basically
you're
saying
pretty much free to go if you're vaccinated, and if you're not vaccinated, you're pretty much, it's like last year.
Yeah, but it's worse. And they're basically saying, yeah, we're not going to make it a guideline for you to get vaccinated. We're not going to tell you to get vaccinated. We're just going to make your life living hell if you don't get vaccinated. And they're basically incentivizing those that do get vaccinated. I love that they're doing that. I'm not saying that anybody should get the vaccine or shouldn't, though I personally believe in getting it. And I'm glad that the NFL players are now incentivized to get it. But you look at the NBA where LeBron hasn't gotten the vaccine. Chris Paul isn't vaccinated. I don't think the NFL is going to have that same problem because the restrictions where even if you don't want to get the vaccine, you're going to look at the fact that you got to get tested twice a day. If you're in close proximity, you're have quarantine for whatever amount of hours and all of that. And you're probably going to end up getting it just based on life convenience. And so for that reason, I love what the NFL is doing from that standpoint. And I can't wait. I'm actually going to a game at Levi's this year for the first time, so I'm super excited. I'll be at the Niners-Bears game, so I cannot wait for the fans and everything.
I appreciate you so much coming on. I've been doing my best to try to get my followers, good guests, and you nailed it. Jason nailed it. John Chapman nailed it. Like, you guys
they're all fantastic.
I'm so thankful that you guys come on my channel. I started about 2 years ago and it was slow going for a while. Oh, I guess one of my followers wants me to read a super chat. Vish, great insight. I have a different stance, but shout out to the man and keep up the grind.
Stances, I think he disagrees with me a little bit. I respect that. I definitely respect that. And I do want to say,
you were pretty close on a lot of it. I do kind of agree with Larry as far as the whole, Chris Jones thing, But I also agree with you that if Jimmy plays better in that game, it's a different outcome. So it's kind of like a mix of everything. There's more than
Right.
one way to skin a cat, so to
Of
speak. So
course. Of course. And I do want to say, like, I don't want to sound like I'm minimizing the Chris Jones aspect, because Chris Jones' impact to me, he was the second best football player in that game after Nick Bosa. He had a hell of a football game. He dominated, right? I don't want to diminish the fact that, like, it was all 100% Jimmy. Just in my opinion, it was more Jimmy rather than the offensive line, because I don't think extra protection is going to make him a more accurate quarterback or end up seeing the field correctly, because he was protected well in a lot of games in 2019 where he didn't see the field correctly, and he wasn't the most accurate quarterback at times. And so that's where I stand. I get that if people disagree, but Aaron, man, thank you so much for having me. I understand you were talking about how it's been a slow process for 2 years. I'm glad that you've grown and everything. You do an awesome job. I really enjoyed coming on with you. And if you will have me, I would love to come on again. I know we got cut short a little bit today because I have to actually head out somewhere, but I really appreciate you having me, and I enjoyed every moment being on here with you. You do an awesome job.
I appreciate it. I'm actually trying to, one of my guests wanted to read a super chat real quick to you, but I can't get my comments to scroll up for some reason. Oh, yeah. This sucks. I unfortunately can't get my comments to scroll up, guys. It's like stuck on my computer. But I don't know. His name is Tommy Huxley. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I can't find his super chat, actually. I can't scroll down either, but I know Tommy, he's always watching our shows. I appreciate his support. He's a great guy.
Tom, if you can send me a message or something, or another one, I'll try to get it on next time, or I'll send, if it's a request for Vish or something, let me know. I can't, for some reason, it won't read up on my chat. So, all right, Vish, I'll let you go, man. Thank you, and I'll definitely gonna have you on again if you let me.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Aaron. Congratulations on everything you've done. You do an awesome job. And if anybody's not subscribed to Aaron, please do it right now. This guy is doing an awesome job.
Thank you, Vish. All right, everybody, have a good one, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Bye, guys.